What is up, guys, and welcome to another video and a new series on this channel where we talk about the truth about nutrition. I'm gonna call this the truth and what we really know about nutrition. I'm super excited to share this with you. I hope that it may help some of you, and I want to say let's get right into it. I have always been reluctant to share my diet and in general to give dietary advice because I felt like nobody really knew what really was going on with nutrition and exercise. There are contradicting studies and advice to the millions online, so it is really confusing. I did not know who to believe, so I kind of did trial and error and found something low carb that works for me, and maybe that's not even the best solution for me. A few weeks ago, I came across this book called The Diet Myth by Timothy Spector. He is an epidemiologist and a scientific writer, and his book stunned me. He is considering all relevant studies regarding nutrition and exercise and giving new insights into how nutrition really works. This series will be based on his book, which, by the way, I leave the link down in the description. This is not sponsored. I found this book. He has nothing to do with it, but I thought it would be really cool if I work through the book and recite the most important things and make it more visible and audible for you. Let's get into this. So today's topic is going to be calories. Everywhere you go, you will find new, old, but in general confusing advice about how to diet. How are you supposed to know what's right for you? Basically, every macronutrient was labeled as evil in the past decades. 1/5 of the population of Great Britain is currently on a diet, but still the national waistline increases by 2 centimeters each year. Obesity increased worldwide, and even though it's not classified as an illness, its consequences are deadly. 300 million people suffer from diabetes, and this number increases each year by 2%, which means it spreads 2 times faster than the world population. And because nobody really knows what's going on, the reasoning is that people just simply eat too much. Interesting, however, is that not only the developed country, like for example Europe and the US, suffer from this problem, but also poor countries where you would expect malnutrition. Doctors try to fight this obesity epidemic by telling their patients to lose weight, but this is a rather poor attempt to help them because most of the times it's not crowned with any success. Most patients actually gain more weight and their health deteriorated. Of course, if you refer them to a clinic and feed them only 1,000 calories instead of the 2,600 plus calories they need in a day, they will effectively lose weight. But other than in military camps or in closed facilities like that, monitoring and control something like that is not possible. Mr. Spector's own health problems and the confusing information about nutrition led him to try to find the truth about it. He had a research team of 50 people behind him and also 11,000 twins to conduct studies and finding out what really makes us fat and what really affects our weight. So to begin this topic, basically, I want to talk to you about microorganisms. Genes do have an effect on what we eat and if we gain or lose weight. But one big factor was missed when trying to find the real cause of obesity: microorganisms in our guts. Microorganisms are a primitive form of life that we ignore for the most part. You might associate microorganisms or bacteria with dirt and animals, but actually 2 kilograms of our body consist out of these bacteria and microorganisms. They will also play a huge role in this series. So now imagine all the stars in the universe and then pick up a handful of dirt and you will have more microorganisms in this handful of dirt than there are stars in the universe. Microorganisms are present everywhere, and they tend to have a bad reputation because a tiny bit of the population of them is actually bad for us. Our contact with microorganisms starts with birth. We are sterile, basically coming out of the womb for a millisecond, and then microorganisms start to inhabit us. First, they're living on our outsides, and then through, hand-mouth contact, they get into our insides. The microorganisms that survive our stomach acids get to the gut and start growing colonies. And as disgusting this might sound, these little creatures are vital for our survival. Tests with sterile mice are going to be the key to many of these findings. So they took sterile mice, that means they kept them from any microorganisms even during and after birth, and they kept them in sterile cages. So they basically lived a completely sterile life. Their bodies were weaker than normal, and also they didn't develop properly. Interesting is, however, that these mice needed 30% more calories to survive than those mice that had microorganisms in them. That shows that microorganisms are vital when it comes to weight gain and weight loss and weight and calories or energy in general. The colon microbiome is probably responsible for the increasing obesity crisis. Differences between the bacteria that lives in our guts can explain why a diet with high fat works for some and is harmful for others, or why low carbs works for some and makes others fat. So the difference, the variety of bacteria basically determine what diet is best for you. The key to healthy gut microorganisms is variety and diversity. 15,000 years ago, our ancestors ate around 150 different food components every week. Today, it's less than 20. And the four main ingredients of most foods are either corn, wheat, soy, or meat. Imagine your microbiome as a garden. The humus, the breeding ground, your guts, need a lot of different nutrients in order for your plants, the microorganisms, to grow. In order to prevent tates or weed to grow, like toxic bacteria, we need to eat the broadest spectrum of nutrients. So diversity is key. Coming to energy and calories, I think the part you guys were all waiting for. Eat less and be more active is probably the most heard advice when it comes to weight loss. In other words, calories in versus calories out is what it comes down to. So a calorie is a calorie no matter where it's coming from. This statement is correct at its very basics. A calorie is defined as energy that is released when burning a specific amount of dry food. This is the basis of what companies put on their nutrition label. A 6-year-long study, however, with 42 apes was conducted with 2 different diets. The only difference in the diet was that one group of the apes got 17% fat, and all of this fat stemmed from either plants or nuts, so it was some sort of healthy fat. The other group of apes had all their 17% of fat intake from trans fats. The diet was designed to have the apes maintain their weight, so they had the same amount of calories every day, both groups. The results, however, show that the apes that got their fats from trans fats developed 3 times the amount of visceral fat than the other group. That suggests that calories are not calories. Does matter where they're coming from. The numbers on the nutrition labels you find are based on an average, but these numbers tend to deviate from the true nutritional value. So it was found that, for example, the caloric value of almonds was overestimated by 30%, while the caloric value of processed foods such as deep frozen pizza and stuff like that was underestimated up to 70%. Also, how the body produces energy from foods depends heavily on what kind of food it is, how you chew it and how digestible it is in general. For example, eating white rice with chopsticks instead of a fork raises the glucose levels significantly slower. But how the body reacts to food also depends on your personal, physical, and genetical characteristics and on your microbiome in your guts. So a calorie may be a calorie on a label, but not in the real world. An experiment from 1988 with students that were overfed 1,000 calories each day surprised the researchers with a broad spectrum of weight gains. Some of the students gained up to 13 kilograms in 100 days, and some of them only 5 kilograms. The study was conducted with twins, and the weight gain of the twin almost equaled the weight gain of his sibling. So that shows that genetics plays a big role. Not only if you gain weight, but also how fast you eat and what kind of food you prefer depends on genetics. Studies also suggest that overweight people's genes are responsible for their lack of motivation for physical activity. The truth is that a lot of our state of body and how we react to food and calories and how active we are has to do with genes, but this is not set in stone. It is changeable, and we will see that over the course of the series. I'm so excited for this. It is so cool. It's often believed that our population gains weight because we sit more and move less than our ancestors. This is not exactly true. This theory implies that our ancestors barely had enough food to survive. This is probably not correct. New studies suggest that most of our ancestors had enough food and sometimes excess amounts of food, so they weren't starving all the time. Another myth is that our ancestors ran around like marathon runners in order to get food, to hunt for prey. The truth here is that most of our ancestors probably rested most of the day or slept. Therefore, they didn't burn more calories than we do today. These gaps in the theory of the economic gene, which supposedly makes us store fat because we're always starving and we moved a lot back in the days, led the biologist John Speakman to look for an alternate explanation for our weight gain, and this one he calls the genetic shift. He suggests that our genes developed a mechanism on both ends of the fat and thin spectrum that forces us back on the middle ground. So this mechanism of genes doesn't allow us to get thinner than a point. Like, for example, if the last fat reserves on our body are really hard to get rid of, probably because of this safety mechanism. And then on the other side, the safety mechanism had us not gain more weight even if we had excess calories. Because since there were predators that were actually specialized in hunting humans, it was not an advantage to be massively overweight. So this mechanism on the upper side was protecting us from being prey. However, climate change and food shortage had us starving, so we had to be protected on the other side, the lower end side, so we wouldn't starve and had fat reserves the body wouldn't give up easily. With losing our predators over the millions of years of development, it's believed that this control mechanism on the upper side of gaining weight became less and less strict. While some might still have the gene that controls that weight gain, the general genetic effect mitigated, and therefore the threshold of maximum weight shifted upwards and now allows the population to become in fact fatter. How important now is physical activity? Do we really move less? We cannot argue with the fact that being active helps you live longer and keeps you healthier. But how much exercise is necessary? Suggestions reach from 90 minutes a week to 6 hours a week. Studies also suggest that training or going to the training is not a question of being motivated. A study with twins a few years back showed that the tendency to be physically active is genetically determined. That implies that being active is actually easier for some people, while it might be harder for other people. Also, some suggest that we become fatter as a population because we sit more and move less. less. Bottom line, the truth is that our physical activity did not significantly change since the 1980s. So blaming sitting more and moving less for the obesity crisis is not correct. Also, a big question that Mr. Spector tackled was, does exercise help us lose weight? Millions of people are physically active but cannot shed a pound. This is because our body tries to compensate for energy expenditure. The body is trimmed to regulate loss of energy with storing fat, and losing fat costs us 5 times more energy than breaking down muscle, which means that the body rather tends to break down muscle than fat. A study with exercising volunteers showed that instead of the expected 4.5 kilograms they were supposed to lose during the study, they only lost 1.5 kilograms. Other studies show that your metabolism slows down in order to compensate for the energy lost. So sports by itself without any dietary restrictions does not really help you lose weight. And that comes from someone that goes to the gym every single day. Of course, it helps you to tone muscle, build muscle, and keep muscle, but actually reducing mass of fat by sports alone is very hard. In general, I can say that going to the gym, besides the muscle building and muscle maintenance, will have a positive effect on your health and on your life expectancy. Our microorganisms also play a huge role in how our training can positively affect our lives. But these understandings are still infantile, so there's a lot of research to be done. But what we know is that training stimulates the immune system that sends chemical signals to our microorganisms and the other way around. An experiment with rats showed that rats who had access to a running wheel and used it produced double the amount of the fatty acid butyrat, I hope I said that correctly, than the rats that didn't have a wheel and therefore didn't do any exercise. Having the right microorganisms in your gut can also improve your training. Therefore, you can, for example, run longer or lift heavier. A study with rugby players analyzed the players' gut bacteria during their phase of intensive training for preparation for the season. To compare the results, they found a group of average men that weren't really active. The results were stunning. The athletes had a significant larger variety of gut bacteria than the group of average men. It's not clear, however, if that was due to their diet or the exercise, but one thing is true: sports will help you live longer and also keeps your microbiome healthier, which has a positive effect on you, as we will see. What did we learn? Calories are not calories, and sport doesn't make you thinner. However, there's a lot to talk about. The microbiome plays a huge role. I can tell you that much. Next time we're going to talk about fat, and I advise you today to get a high-fat yogurt, low-sugar yogurt to support your gut bacteria and actually help you lose weight, be healthier, feel better. I'm super excited for what Mr. Spector has in store for you, and I see you in the next video, guys.